And here is how the house began to split. In the name of the state makers, all the signs banished overnight. As if the hand could become enemy or oppressor. As if the hand dared a demon. As if the hand was wrong. And not a white hawthorn globe like a lantern trembling in moonlight, or a young salmon glittering upstream. World became a forced grammar, mimicking a dream, before body corrected, before body stilled, before the speech sounds for body, fable, sin. Hello, and welcome to Words That Burn, the podcast taking a closer look at poetry. This week's poem is The Language Ban by Annemarie Ní Churreáin. This poem is taken from her 2021 collection, The Poison Glen. The sinister title of the collection draws its name from the area in Ireland called the Poison Glen. It is an area just outside Gweedore in Donegal. That's a Gaeltacht area, one of the few remaining places in Ireland where Gaeilge is exclusively spoken as the first language. The rather ominous name of the area came from its equally ominous history. The Irish name for this place is Crow Niva, so called because it is said to be the site where Balor, the one-eyed tyrant and leader of the Fomorians, fell to his grandson Lug, or Lu, depending on how you pronounce it. Upon his death, that evil singular eye, often referred to as his poisoned eye, split, spewing its contents into the glen, poisoning the earth. You might scratch your head and wonder why Ní Churreáin would choose such a dark and twisted location as the title of her collection. But once you've read it, and I strongly recommend that you do, you'll understand why. It's easy in the modern day, through the lens of relentless tourism campaigns and a government that seems utterly dedicated to sanitising its country's past and culture, to imagine that Ireland is the plucky little nation that could. That we on the island are an enduring race of underdogs who always triumph. Underneath that sanitised international image is an earth soaked in blood, struggle and suppression. It is an Ireland that is often overlooked, one that remains invisible through countless state cover-ups and a system dedicated to brushing it all under the rug. The nameless narrator of Ní Churreáin's collection travels around Ireland, bearing witness to a seemingly endless litany of abuses of power and dark goings-on the island. To be clear, the collection is not some nativist critique, decrying some invisible threat of foreigners, some thinly veiled Ireland for the Irish rubbish. That's not what's being referenced here. Instead, Ní Churreáin is ensuring that the harm done by centuries of colonialism at the hands of the English, and then decades of abuse by the Catholic Church and the new Irish state government, working hand in hand, is never forgotten. In her own words, the poet notes her curiosity about this specific power dynamic and how it shaped the island. She stated in an interview, "I've always been curious about the national identity forged for Irish people by the Catholic Church working in conjunction with the Irish state. De Valera, who was of course in conversation with his friends in the Vatican, evolved a very flawed identity for Irish women, children and families. I think the cost of that forged identity has been enormous because people who didn't fit the mould suffered immensely." In the pages of the Poison Glen are countless poems dedicated to preserving the awful events that happened in mother and baby homes and reform schools across the country. Those events often causing the most harm to those, as Ní Churreáin says, that didn't fit the mould. These events are ones that have left the Irish people reeling and still echo their damage to this day. The epigraph hanging above this poem reads, "At St. Joseph's School for Deaf Boys, Cabra, Dublin, 1857 to 1999. This is one such location where this kind of suppression and oppression that Ní Churreáin writes about took place. With this crucial context in mind, the title of the Poison Glen does not seem so unusual. In her collection, Ní Churreáin fuses folklore, paganism, modern abuse, and suppressed history into a single, haunting, and unbelievably moving collection. The Language Ban is just one of those poems. I again urge you to read the entire collection. I honestly believe it's critical reading for anyone seeking to better understand the history of Ireland and the trials and tribulations that have formed the modern Irish identity. It is a testament to the power of poetry beyond romanticism and sentiment. Annemarie Ní Churreáin is without a doubt one of the finest poets we have. Each poem acts as an investigation fueled by emotion and an unblinking eye to the past. Ní Churreáin's dedication to preserving the darker parts of Irish history are on full display here. The four-stanza poem that is the Language Ban hones in on the core issues arising from the long occupation of the Irish under the English. That is, the suppression of language. In this poem, though, it is not a ban on Gaeilge, the Irish language, but rather a ban on another native language on the island. ISL, or Irish Sign Language, was the method of communication that natively evolved within deaf communities and people in Ireland. Much like any other language, it is a way of communication that was completely shaped by its geography and native culture. Irish Sign Language is something that is distinct from both British and American Sign Language in much the way that Italian or Spanish Sign Language would be completely different. When researching the history of ISL, I was fascinated to find that variations even occurred between men and women who used ISL, as the language would develop in isolation due to the strict segregation of male and female students in the Irish education system. That strict segregation was a religious one, and it's understandable then that the suppression and loss of this language would be a blow similar to losing any native tongue. With the loss of language comes the loss of identity, culture, and history that is encoded within it. We nearly lost ISL on this island, and the source of the threat to it is revealed in the first stanza. And here is how the house began to split. In the name of the state makers, all the signs banished overnight. Annemarie Ní Churreáin establishes an immediate moment of intrigue in the chaotic image of the splitting house. There is a mystery in her phrasing that draws us in as readers. We want to understand the source of this split, and for that reason, we keep reading. What follows that powerful opening line is a masterfully put together sequence of imagery. Two core images make it up: the state makers and the signs. This deceptively simple opening 3 lines does one of my favourite things in poetry. It layers multiple meanings and interpretations into seemingly bare words. Without the correct context, state makers is a challenging image to decipher. On the one hand, she could be referring to the state makers of Ireland, the likes of De Valera, who enforced a rigid form of identity on the Irish public. This becomes more evident as the poem progresses, when Ní Churreáin investigates the influence of religion on ISL, but we'll get to that later. What Ní Churreáin is actually referencing is an international education conference known as the Milan Conference. It was a summit where educators of the deaf around the world met to share ideas and decide policies on education of deaf people going forward. This took place in 1880. Notably, given the effect it would have on the island, there were no Irish delegates attending. One of the key issues at this conference was a discussion around the adoption of oralism. Oralism, in a nutshell, was the notion that deaf children should be educated using language as opposed to signing. It was the misheld belief that deaf children should be treated no differently from those with full hearing. Its fundamental tenet was that signing should be abolished when educating the deaf. The emphasis at the conference was the pure oral method should be preferred. Thus began the rise of oralism across Europe, and why Ní Churreáin refers to the state makers. It is those international representatives that made a huge decision affecting thousands. The mention of the house beginning to split could be St. Joseph's itself, as there was quite a bit of pushback from the deaf community in Ireland towards this idea. This led to a schism within that community, as those in favour of adopting the new oralism clashed with those that felt there was no need to enforce such a rigorous and untested new system on young people. As oralism came in, those that resisted it, relying on the old ISL signing methods, were pushed out. This is the schism that Ní Churreáin is referencing. The rise of oralism lends an extra weight to that initial image of signs banished overnight. It's a simple line on the surface, but one that is a testament to Ní Churreáin's intricate layering of meaning in her poetry. Firstly, it ties in with the idea of the house splitting, the signs being a way to navigate towards a place or building. They are gone now, and with them a sense of understanding and navigation is gone too. It's an elegant way to acknowledge the sheer confusion that must have accompanied the regime change for the deaf community. The choice of the word banished embodies the shame that was branded into the idea of signing in light of this new way of educating the deaf. That shame would take on even deeper layers for the Irish deaf community, as we'll see in the next stanza. As if the hand could become enemy or oppressor, as if the hand dared a demon, as if the hand was wrong. The speaker of the poem undermines this banishing of the signs in the second stanza. The hand, the key to all signing, becomes the focus point. More importantly, it is how the hand and signing in general were stigmatized that is the real focus. Whilst oralism brought a significant amount of shame to signing globally, it took on a particularly pointed and deep form of it in Ireland. That is because most education at the time of its adoption was heavily Catholicised. To deter children from signing and ensure oralism was practiced, signing became interwoven with the concept of sin within the Catholic faith. Ní Churreáin's quasi-religious imagery begins to make more sense with this in mind. The speaker of the poem makes it clear that the entanglement of a basic dignified means of communication and damnation is ridiculous. Using your hands to sign could never make you an enemy. Using your hands to sign could never be demonic or against God. Finally, in its simplest form, using your hand to sign could never be something bad or evil in the first place. There are many parallels to be drawn here between deaf education and regular education under the heavy, oppressive weight of the Catholic system in Ireland. It harkens back to the idea of using religion to limit children's uses of native language. The demonisation of signing was compounded by claims that oralism led to a higher level of education and better retention among deaf students. In actual fact, in Ireland at least, it proved to be absolutely detrimental to the quality of the education received by those who were hearing impaired. Thus far, all the losses I've listed have been obvious and empirically backed in places. They were measurable to some degree. The next stanza of the poem, however, shows us the more ephemeral and subtle things that can be lost when a language is suppressed. And not a white hawthorn globe, like a lantern trembling in moonlight, or a young salmon glittering upstream. This entire stanza feels like a flash or a glimmer in the dark. I think it's an incredible piece of image making, one that conjures exactly what it intends to in your mind. Annemarie Ní Churreáin has always had an extraordinary ability to embody the wild and often fleeting experience of the natural world in her poetry. Ní Churreáin's deep love of Irish language and culture is on show here. Ireland's folkloric past and actual history fuse in her work quite often and act as one of her key inspirations. In her own words, "I've always tried to remain open to obscured or hidden layers of history and thinking about how history and folklore intersect and where are the traces of magic or the other world in the landscape." That first image of the hawthorn globe reinforces this idea of darkness creeping in due to the banished signs in the first stanza. The hawthorn globe is like a lantern, a guiding light at night. This is a very poetic image of the hawthorn tree, as in the Irish language, or Oscuelga, the hawthorn is known as the sceach geal, or bright thorn. It's named so for the distinctive white spikes that adorn it. In Irish folklore and mythology, the hawthorn is revered as a gateway to the other place, as well as a symbol of fortitude and good luck. During Ireland's Anglicisation, many of our ties to the landscape through our native tongue were lost. It was an erasure of meaning. Ní Churreáin is showing a similar loss of connection with the landscape and our country in the erasure of Irish Sign Language. A guiding light is being snuffed out. Following that, we get a glimpse of a salmon as it pushes its way upstream in the dead of night. I think this is a wonderful depiction of the flashes of movement that physically take place when deaf people sign to one another. Their communication is lightning quick, a kind of blink and you'll miss it repartee. Ní Churreáin sees the inherent beauty in this way of communicating and commits it to poetry. That image of the salmon works on multiple levels. That particular fish has a place in Irish myth, associated with a particular story known as the salmon of knowledge. In choosing it, Ní Churreáin is once again ensuring that we understand that ISL is a form of deep knowledge and has an inherent value to it. Before we move into the final lines, it's important to note that enjambment takes place between the second and third stanza. There is a gorgeous fluidity between them because of this, one that Ní Churreáin brings to a slow halt with the final stanza. World became a forced grammar, mimicking a dream, before body corrected, before body stilled, before the speech sounds for body, fable, sin. The fluid communication that signing brought to the deaf community is suddenly gone, replaced by what the poem calls a forced grammar. This closing is devastating, as the phrase resonates on multiple levels. Linguistically, it is the imposition of an oral language. Bodily, it is the physical correction and restriction of signing. And metaphysically, it is the coercion of identity. Oralism becomes a mere parody of the easy communication that the deaf community once had. It is the mimicking of a dream, one that was once filled with life and movement. As the idea of Irish Sign Language is removed from the poem, replaced by oralism, the poem itself stiffens and stills, mimicking the bodies which are now becoming sites of rigid discipline, first corrected and then stilled into submission. Ní Churreáin brings this into physical form in the poem. As the poem closes, we see that it slows bit by bit, with the indent of each line pushing further to the left, physically slowing down the speed at which we can read, evoking the stiffness that Ní Churreáin is writing about. The final line reveals exactly what this suppression has cost, introducing 3 weighted words: body, fable, sin. With this, the poem suggests that natural embodiment itself has been mythologized, moralized, and ultimately branded as sinful for deviating from the imposed norm. The language ban is a testament not only to what was lost, a language as beautiful and fluid as a salmon in moonlight, but to the enduring power of the body and the spirit to remember, even after it has been corrected or stilled. Annemarie Ní Churreáin's collection, The Poison Glen, is a refusal to forget. It charts a landscape that remembers every drop of blood spilt in unjust punishment, every syllable silenced cruelly, and every child condemned to misery by the Catholic Church. It is a strange and haunted new folklore of Ireland. This poem is one of the many within its pages and explores just what was done to the island when its language, be it by mouth or hand, was silenced. What did you think of the poem? As always, this is my interpretation, and I'd love to hear yours. If you'd like to get in touch with me, there are a few ways to do so. You can reach me directly by email at wordsthatburnpodcast@gmail.com. You can get in touch to the podcast website, www.wordsthatburnpodcast.com. I'm on Instagram at wordsthatburnpodcast. I'm on TikTok at wordsthatburn2. I'm on Blue Sky at wordsthatburn. And I'm on Twitter or X at wordsthatburn. If you'd like to read the script for this week's podcast, complete with citations and sources, check the Substack link in the description below. If you enjoyed the episode or know someone else who might, please consider sending it to them directly or leaving me a review wherever you listen. It's a huge help in getting the podcast out to new people. Words That Burn is written and produced by me, Benjamin Colopy.